Two styles of architecture and art dominated Western Europe after 1000. The first was Romanesque, succeeded gradually during the 1100s by the new Gothic style, which looped in some places until well into the 16th century. The terms Romanesque and Gothic were originally applied only to architecture, and although they are still used mainly in this field, they have been extended to cover other arts of their respective periods. The two styles spread all over Europe, taking on many different national and local variations as they did so. Romanesque. As the name suggests, Romanesque architecture revived certain features of ancient Roman art, especially its sheer ambition. Romanesque buildings are often immense, expressing a new confidence following a period when Western Christendom had been threatened with destruction. Large-scale sculpture similarly was revived, and painting and the minor arts also flourished. Chartres Cathedral begun in 1194. Chartres is one of the greatest of the French Gothic cathedrals, famous for its sculpture and stained glass as well as for its architecture shown here. Gothic. Whereas Romanesque architecture is massive and often overpoweringly austere, Gothic architecture at its most characteristic is soaringly graceful, based on a new skeletal system of construction that enabled large windows to take the place of solid areas of wall. In painting and sculpture too, art of the Gothic period is typically refined, with figures often having elongated proportions and a sense of flowing elegance. Like Romanesque art, Gothic art was used predominantly in the service of the Christian Church, although it also had secular expressions, particularly when it developed into the courtly style known as International Gothic. Current events. 910 The Benedictine Abbey of Cluny in Burgundy, France, is established, initiating a period of monastic reform throughout Europe. 962 Otto is crowned Roman Emperor by the Pope in Rome, setting up the Holy Roman Empire as the main temporal power in Western Europe. 1066 William of Normandy invades and conquers England. 1346-51 Black Death, plague, devastates Europe, killing perhaps one-third of the total population. Romanesque and Gothic art. Giselbertus. Active first half of 12th century. Most Romanesque art is of anonymous workmanship, but the names of a few artists have survived, notably the great sculptor Giselbertus, who worked in the Burgundy region of France around 1125. Nothing is recorded about his life or personality, but his name is known because he signed his masterpiece, The Last Judgment, at Autun Cathedral. Other sculpture at the cathedral is obviously by the same hand, and on the strength of these works, he is regarded as one of the giants of medieval art. His style is imaginative and emotionally intense, with an expressive use of distortion that is typical of Romanesque art. The Last Judgment fills the tympanum, decorative semicircular area, over the west doorway, the main entrance of Autun Cathedral. In addition, Giselbertus carved about 60 capitals, the topmost part of columns, inside the cathedral and decoration for the north doorway. This doorway has been destroyed, but fragments of the sculpture survive, including a famous reclining nude figure of Eve. Giselbertus must have had assistance when working on such large commissions, but all the carving at Autun is so distinctive and of such high quality that they were presumably involved only in fairly menial capacities. The Last Judgment, the awe-inspiring image of Christ, depicted much larger in scale than all the other figures, dominates the tympanum on the west portal. He is shown separating the blessed, on the left-hand side, from the damned, on the right. 1125-35 Stone, Cathedral of Saint Lazare, Autun, France. Cielo-Luc. Inscription: The sculptor prominently signed his name beneath the figure of Christ, Giselbertus hoc fecit. Gilbert made this. High relief below the main scene are figures of the blessed being resurrected, left, and the damned being chased to hell. They are carved in high relief, at times almost detached from the background. Eve, the lintel of the now destroyed north doorway of the cathedral, showed the temptation and fall. This figure of Eve is unique in medieval art, for it houses her in large scale as a reclining nude. See 1125-35 Stone, Musée Rollin, Autun, France. Nicholas of Verdun. Active late 12th, early 13th century. During the Romanesque and Gothic periods, There was no hierarchy dividing the major arts of painting and sculpture from what are now sometimes described as the minor arts, such as metalwork. Indeed, work in precious materials had great prestige, especially when it was used in the creation of prominent art for the church. One of the most notable artists who produced such work, incorporating classical and natural elements, was the goldsmith and enameller Nicholas of Verdun. Nothing is known of his life, apart from the fact that, as his name indicates, he came from Verdun in France. There are 2 signed works by him, both still in the churches for which he made them: the Klosterneuburg altar, finished 1181 and originally made to decorate; a pulpit in Klosterneuburg Abbey, near Vienna; and the Shrine of the Virgin Mary, 1205, which is in Tournai Cathedral, Belgium. Shrine of the Virgin Mary. Tournai Cathedral is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and this shrine was made to contain relics relating to her, although these no longer exist. It is decorated with various scenes relating to Mary and Jesus. 1205. Gold and other materials, 78 by 88 centimeters, Cathedral de Notre Dame, Tournai, Belgium. He Klosterneuburg altar. The altar is the greatest piece of enamel work of the Middle Ages. Enamel is a glassy substance that is fused to a metallic background by means of intense heat. It can create brilliant color effects. 1181, Gold and Enamel, Klosterneuburg Monastery, Austria. CLOSERIAC. Biblical scenes. The altarpiece shows the complex relationship between various scenes from the Old and the New Testament. Vigorous design animals, such as this donkey, as well as human figures, are described by Nicholas of Verdun with engaging vitality. Different colored enamels are used with great effect to tell the biblical stories, this one showing the Nativity. And Myosin School. Meuse Valley, c. 1125 c. 1200. Mosin refers to the river Meuse, which flows through parts of France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. During the 12th century, art flourished in the Meuse Valley, especially in the area around Liège, and it is to this that the phrase, Mosin School, is applied. Mosin artists were particularly renowned for their lavish metalwork and enamel work, but other skills, including ivory carving and manuscript illumination, also developed in the area, which was very prosperous at this time. Several leading Mosin artists are known by name, notably Nicholas of Verdun. Although Mosin art comes within the broader category of Romanesque art, it has certain distinct features, particularly in the treatment of the human figure. Instead of the free use of distortion and exaggeration found in much Romanesque art, work of the Mosin school has an almost classical dignity in its figure style. Cross attributed to Godfred de Huy. Godfred was famous in his time as a goldsmith, but attributions to him are highly speculative. C. 1130-50, Gold, Enamel, and Other Materials. British Museum, London, UK. Gothic stained glass. C. 1150-1500. Stained glass was first used on an extensive scale during the Romanesque period, but it really came of age in the Gothic era, when it was one of the glories of medieval art. As the Gothic style matured and glass-making technology improved, church windows grew to huge size, encouraging stained glass designers to develop their art. It flourished particularly in France, but also in other countries of Northern and Western Europe, not least England. It was of comparatively marginal importance in Italy, where the Gothic style was never fully assimilated and wall painting remained the primary form of church decoration. The cathedrals of Chartres and Canterbury are among the buildings that are especially renowned for their glass. Early Gothic stained glass has a magnificent grandeur and boldness, with strong, pure colors, but from the 15th century it tended to imitate the effects of painting, gaining in subtlety but often losing in vigor. Seen from the life of St. Thomas of Becket. He murders of Archbishop Thomas of Becket in 1170 in his own cathedral turned Canterbury into a pilgrimage site. The windows in the Trinity Chapel behind the high altar depict scenes from his life. C. 1220, Stained Glass, Trinity Chapel, Canterbury Cathedral, UK. Noah's Ark. This is part of a large window depicting the Old Testament story of Noah and the flood. C. 1200-20, Stained Glass, Chartres Cathedral, France. Italian art of the late 13th and 14th centuries differs fundamentally from that produced elsewhere in Europe at the time. While art in other countries was predominantly of anonymous authorship, in Italy there were numerous painters and sculptors who are known by name and who left a body of documented or firmly attributed works. Italy at this time was not a unified country, but was made up of a number of small states. It was much more urbanized than other parts of Europe, and the major cities competed in many ways, including artistic patronage. They wanted their churches and civic buildings to be bigger and better than those of their rivals, and they wanted to have them decorated by the best available artists. Origins and influences. Various currents flowed through Italian art in the early 14th century, including influences from the Gothic style, which was dominant in most of Europe, and from Byzantine culture. Constantinople, Byzantium, was captured by Crusaders in 1204, and this increased the contact between Italian and Byzantine art. In the later 14th century, however, the austere otherworldliness of Byzantine art began to be softened by a new naturalism and humanity. Looking forward to the Renaissance. Subjects. Religion was a major inspiration to artists at this time. Altarpieces and church frescoes were the dominant forms in painting, and sculptural types included pulpits and statues of saints. However, secular subjects were beginning to emerge, notably in the decoration of civic buildings such as town halls. Style and techniques. During this period, Italian painters established ways of working that endured for centuries. The two standard techniques of painting were tempera, in which the colors are mixed with egg, and fresco. Tempera was used on wooden panels, and fresco is a method of wall painting in which paint is applied to fresh wet plaster. Many artists were masters of both techniques. In sculpture, the materials for the most prestigious works were marble and bronze. Sometimes the bronze was gilded, covered with a thin layer of gold, an expensive and time-consuming process. St. John baptizing. This gilded bronze panel from a set of doors by Andrea Pisano was designed around 1330 to 36 for the Florence Baptistry, a commission expressing great civic pride. Early Italian art. Nicola and Giovanni Pisano. Nicola, Via Puglia, c. 1220, di Pisa, c. 1278-84, Giovanni B. Pisa, c. 1245-50, di Siena, c. 1314-19. Nicola and Giovanni Pisano, father and son, were the first great personalities in the history of Italian sculpture. They are often seen as counterparts of their near contemporary Giotto, see page 86, in painting, even though their work was not quite so momentous as his. They occasionally worked together but mainly had separate commissions. These included a series of 4 magnificent pulpits, 2 by Nicola and 2 by Giovanni, in the baptistry at Pisa, 1259, Siena Cathedral, 1265-68, S. Andrea, Pistoia, 1300-2001, and Pisa Cathedral, 1302-10. The first of these is Nicola's masterpiece, showing a strength and dignity that reflects the influence of ancient Roman sculpture. Giovanni's style was more emotional and energetic than his father's and sometimes had a Gothic elegance. In addition to his pulpits, his work included the rich sculptural decoration of the facade of Siena Cathedral, of which he was also the architect. Adoration of the Magi. One of the 6 reliefs around Nicola's pulpit shows the 3 kings worshipping Jesus. The Virgin Mary has the dignity and grandeur of a Roman noblewoman as she holds up the baby to the kings, while their horses look on. 1259 Marble, pulpit height 4.6 m, baptistry Pisa, Italy. Pulpit. Giovanni's pulpit is similar in basic format to his father's in the nearby baptistry. But the style of the carving is a total contrast, crowded and dynamic where Nicola's is sweaty and serene. 1302-10 Marble, height 4.6 m, Pisa Cathedral, Italy. Cielo Asiaraic. Massacre of the Innocents. King Herod presides over his order to kill all the male infants in Bethlehem. Below him is a scene of horrific violence. Virgin and Child. Giovanni carved this sculpture for the Scrovegni Chapel, where Giotto painted his famous fresco cycle, see page 86. Mother and baby hold each other's gaze with a tenderness quite different from that typical medieval portrayal, in which symbolic gesture was more important than human feeling. See 1305 Marble, Scrovegni Chapel, Padua, Italy. Cimabue. Active Tuscany, 1272 to 1302. Cimabue, Isa nickname meaning ox head, perhaps indicating that the artist had an aggressive personality. His real name is Senedi Pepe. Very little is known of his life and works, but he was probably the leading Italian painter in the generation before Giotto, and he may well have been Giotto's teacher, as early sources suggest. In one of these sources, Giorgio Vasari's Lives of the Artists, 1550, he is described as the first Italian painter to break with Byzantine tradition. The works that are usually attributed to him include a magnificent panel of the Madonna enthroned, c. 1280-90, painted for the Church of Santa Trinita, Florence. Madonna enthroned. Cimabue gives the Madonna a tender humanity, and the prophets below are individualized to a degree not previously seen in Byzantine art. c. 1280-90. Tempera on panel, 390 x 220 cm, Uffizi, Florence, Italy. Cielo Esiariac. Angels. The angel's gold halo set off the Madonna's blue robe. The gold would have glinted in the light off the church for which this altarpiece was made. The solemn expressions follow Byzantine tradition, but their ice and elegance and a delicacy of touch that is personal. Ambrogio and Pietro Lorenzetti. Ambrogio, active Siena, 1320-45. Pietro, active Siena, 1319-48. These two brothers were among the leading Sienese painters of their time. They sometimes collaborated but mainly worked independently. Both may have died in an epidemic of the plague in 1348. Most of their work is on religious subjects, but there is one great exception: Ambrogio's fresco cycle on good and bad government, 1338-39, in Siena's Palazzo Pubblico, Town Hall. This is one of the most original works of its time in all European art, showing remarkable panoramic views of town and country, with many beautifully observed details of contemporary life. The frescoes occupy 3 walls of the large room where the councillors who governed Siena held their meetings. Good government in the city. This is part of one of the side walls of the council's meeting room. It moves seamlessly into a scene depicting good government in the country beyond the city wall on the right of the picture. 1338-39, fresco, overall length 14 m, Sala della Pace, Palazzo Pubblico, Siena, Italy. Cielo Esir. People at work to show how well ordered the city is. Bustling citizens are busily at one work everywhere, even on the rooftops. These human figures also give a sense of scale to the magnificent architectural panorama of Siena. Duccio di Buoninsegna. The Unknown, di Siena, 1318-19. Duccio was the greatest and most influential of all Sienese painters. His flowing draftsmanship and wonderfully subtle and expressive coloring inspired followers for generations. There is only one surviving work that is fully documented as his, but this is one of the supreme masterpieces of Italian art, a huge double-sided altarpiece, finished 1311, painted for Siena Cathedral T. His central scene on the front is known as the Maesta, Majesty, and there are numerous smaller front and back panels, mainly showing scenes from Christ's life. Most of the altarpiece survives in Siena Cathedral's museum, but a few panels are lost or have been dispersed to collections outside Italy. Reverse side of the Maesta. The back of the main panel shows 26 scenes from the life of Christ. The 11 here are on the left-hand side of the altarpiece. They include the entry of Christ into Jerusalem on the bottom left, and next to it, Jesus washing the feet of the disciples and the Last Supper. Completed 1311, Tempera on panel, Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, Siena, Italy. He Madonna enthroned / the central panel of Maesta altarpiece. Duxilters the Byzantine tradition, with expressive glances rather than stylized faces, and fluid instead of stiff drapery. Around the base of the throne is an inscription: Holy Mother of God, be the cause of peace to Siena, and of life to Duccio because he has painted you thus. Completed 1311, Tempera on panel, 213 by 396 centimeters, Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, Siena, Italy. Cielo Esiariac. Composition. That symmetrical structure focuses the eye on the centrally placed Madonna and Child. They are the largest figures, because they are the most important. Saints and angels are ranked on either side. Giotto. Be called di Vespignano? Near Florence, c. 1270, d. Florence, 1337. The Florentine painter and architect, Giotto di Bondone, trained under Cimabue, but going further than his master, he replaced the Byzantine art tradition with a degree of naturalism. Giotto rediscovered how to make a flat surface look three-dimensional, using artistic devices that had been forgotten since the classical Greek world. However, achieving the illusion of space, through perspective and light and shade, was not an end in itself for Giotto. Realism was merely the tool he used for his greatest innovation, telling a story with all its human pathos and drama. Giotto's realism was appreciated in his own lifetime, and he was famous and sought after throughout Italy. Despite the plague ravaging 14th century Florence and much of Europe, Italian art never looked the same after Giotto, and his influence was carried all over Europe by Simone Martini and others. Scrovegni Chapel. This chapel was commissioned by a local banker, Enrico Scrovegni, and stands next to Hispalis in Padua. Giotto's frescoes filled interior. 1305 to 2006, Padua, Italy. The Nativity. Giotto uses vivid color to make the story of the birth of Christ come alive. The robe of Joseph, who is seated in the foreground, is intense yellow in its shadows and lightened with white for highlights. C. 1305, fresco, Scrovegni Chapel, Padua, Italy. Adoration of the Magi. All the action in this scene takes place in the foreground, which makes the viewer feel like a participant, worshipping the Christ child along with the kings. The rounded figures look as solid as sculpture. C. 1305, fresco, Scrovegni Chapel, Padua, Italy. Crucifix. Emotion and suffering were part of the Byzantine symbolism that Giotto inherited. Christ has a look of dignified resignation, and his greenish death pallor contrasts with the blood coming from the wound in his chest. Crucifixes like this one were hung high up in churches so that all the congregation could see them. C. 1312, tempera on panel, Higient 57 Santa Maria Novella, Florence, Italy. The Lamentation of Christ. Giotto is the composition to bring out the poignancy of this scene, in which Christ's mother and followers mourn over his dead body. The ridge swoops down from right to left, and John the Baptist's arms swept back contribute to the downward thrust towards the prostrate figure of Christ. The single tree is a medieval symbol of death, and may also represent the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. C. 1305, fresco, Scrovegni Chapel, Padua, Italy. Closer, okay. The angels. While the earthbound figures are frozen in anguish, the angels move freely in the sky. However, their faces mirror the grief below. Each angel has an expression as individual as its pose, and all of them lead the eye to Mary and Jesus. Mother and son. The emotional weight of the tableau is off-center, in the grief-stricken features of the Virgin Mary as she sees her son for the last time. The haggard strain on her face contrasts with the deathly calm on his, especially as she is awkwardly hunched over for this close caress. Simone Martini. B. Siena? 1284, d'Avignon, 1344. Simone Martini probably trained under Duccio, and like his master, he is one of the greatest Sienese painters. His most famous work is the Annunciation, 1333, which he was commissioned to make for Siena Cathedral to partner Duccio's Maesta, 1311. The Annunciation is normally jointly assigned to Simone and his brother-in-law, Lippo Memmi. Simone shared Duccio's interest in colorful pattern, but his style was more Gothic than Byzantine. The delicate grace and decorative detail of the Annunciation appealed to the French, and he spent the last 10 years of his life working in Avignon. Here, his work paved the way for the international Gothic style, adopted by French and other European manuscript illuminators and painters. The Annunciation, flanked by two local patron saints of Siena, the angel Gabriel tells a hesitant Mary that she is to be visited by the Holy Ghost, the dove in the center, and will become the mother of God's Son, Jesus Christ. 1333, tempera on panel, 300 by 270 centimeters, Uffizi, Florence, Italy. Cielo Asiaraic. Angel Gabriel. The words from the Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. In Latin, stream mingled from Gabriel's mouth, and further words from the Hail Mary, a key prayer of Catholicism, are written in the hem of his robes. Gabriel holds an olive branch, a symbol of peace. Saint Martin shares his cloak with a beggar. This scene of generosity is part of a fresco cycle on the life of the saint. Simone gives the action a contemporary castle entrance setting. 1326 fresco, Lower Church of S. Francesco, Assisi, Italy. Jewel bright colors, slender, elongated figures in elaborate costumes, and nature observed and recorded in minute detail all characterize the charmed world of international Gothic. Artists of the time blended elements from Italy and Northern Europe into a sophisticated idiom. Origins and influences. The term, International Gothic, describes a medley of trends that affected the art of various countries in the period from about 1380 to 1430. Elegance of pose and gesture typical of the Gothic style of Northern Europe were combined with a new interest in naturalistic detail. Such fashions were spread by the increased mobility of artists and by the rivalry between courts in making extravagant displays of wealth. Subjects. Religion continued to be the mainstay of art in this period, but secular subjects increased in importance, for example in the manuscript illuminations of the Limbourg brothers. Although the books they created were nominally religious, they contain a wealth of beautifully observed detail of the everyday world. Style and techniques. International Gothic art is often conspicuously luxurious, created for rich and sophisticated patrons who appreciated beautiful craftsmanship. The Wilton diptych and Adoration of the Magi, for example, make abundant use of gold leaf and are painted with exquisite sensitivity. There is also often a strong element of fantasy, as in the architectural background of Pisanello's St. George rescuing the Princess of Trebizond. Portrait medal of Gianfrancesco Gonzaga by Pisanello. The solidity and clarity exemplify Renaissance values, but the delicate observation of plants is typical of International Gothic. International Gothic art. Pisanello. B. Pisa? C. 1394. Drome? 1455. Tantalizingly, little remains of the frescoes and panel paintings of Antonio Pisano, nicknamed Pisanello. The Little Pisan. He and Gentile da Fabriano were Italy's leading international Gothic artists, and they collaborated on frescoes in the Doge's Palace in Venice. Unfortunately, these have not survived. Pisanello worked in various other cities in Italy, including the northern courts of Ferrara, ruled by the Este family, and Mantua, ruled by the Gonzagas. In addition to being an outstanding painter, Pisanello is notable as the inventor and perhaps the finest of all exponents of the portrait medal. He was also a superb draftsman, and many of his drawings of animals survive. The accuracy of his studies shows that scrutiny of nature could sit side by side with the courtly, gem-like style of painting. Portrait of a Lady. There are many romantic theories about this painting. The sitter could be Ginevra d'Este, identified by the juniper, Ginepro in Italian, on her shoulder. In folklore, it was said to protect against early death. She died in 1439, aged 22. Rumor had it after being poisoned by her husband, Sigismondo Malatesta, Lord of Rimini. C. 1436-38, oil on panel, 43 by 30 centimeters, Louvre, Paris. Guinea fowl. Pisanello's drawings include many lively studies of birds and other animals. Pen and ink and watercolor on paper, Louvre, Paris, France. St. George rescuing the Princess of Trebizond. This is one of only 2 surviving frescoes documented as Pisanello's work. The golden-haired St. George has dismounted after slaying the dragon that held the princess captive. She is seen in profile, wearing all her royal splendor. Originally, his armor and her train would have sparkled with gold and silver, but it has been damaged by water seepage. C. 1433-38, fresco, San Anastasia, Verona, Italy. Gentile da Fabriano. B. Fabriano, c. 1385, di Rome, 1427. Along with Pisanello, Gentile is the most renowned Italian painter to exemplify international Gothic. Little of his work has survived, however, and his reputation largely rests on one piece, The Adoration of the Magi, 1423, a large altarpiece made for the Strozzi Chapel in the Church of S. Trinita in Florence. Within its elaborate, pinnacled frame, A cavalcade follows the three kings to worship the newly born Jesus in the left foreground. A golden light unifies the painting, complementing the gilt frame, tooled halos, and embroidered patterns on the king's robes. Gentile's blend of naturalistic light and decorative detail influenced later painters, such as Jacopo Bellini and Fra Angelico. Adoration of the Magi. The kings in the foreground represent old age, kneeling, middle age, bowing, and youth, standing. Behind the standing king is Palestrozzi, the Florentine banker who commissioned the work. 1423, Tempera on panel, 303x282 cm, Uffizi, Florence, Italy. Cielo Asiaraic. The Nativity. The predella, the three in panels below the central image, shows further episodes from Christ's infancy. Gentile uses light rather than line to show form. The light also has a symbolic element. It comes from the baby Jesus himself. The flight into Egypt. The central predella panel. Mary carries Jesus on a donkey through a Tuscan-style landscape. Fra Angelico repeated this composition 30 years later. Paul, Herman, and Jean de Limbourg. Active 1402-16. The Limbourg brothers were Netherlandish manuscript illuminators, and their work is the epitome of the international Gothic style. The colors are bright, with lavish use of blue and gold. The detail is naturalistic and minute, probably painted with the aid of a magnifying glass. Figures are gracefully elongated. The nobility wear fantastic finery, while peasants work the fields. The brothers' main patron was Jean, Duc de Berry, a great manuscript collector for whom they produced 2 illuminated books of hours, selections of prayers and readings. They contain illustrations of various types, but the most remarkable are the full-page depictions of the months in the second book, De Tres Riches Ars. All 3 brothers died in the same year, 1416, probably of the plague, leaving the Tres Riches Ars unfinished. It was completed by the French illuminator Jean Colombi about 70 years later. December. Hunting wild boars / Enthus page from the Tres Riches Ars. A swathe of trees separates the foreground hunt from the background towers. Signs of the zodiac appear at the top of each page devoted to a month. 1411-16, gouache on parchment, 23x14 cm, Musée Condé, Chantilly, France. Master of the Wilton Diptych. Dates unknown. The Wilton Diptych gets its name from Wilton House in Wiltshire, England, where it was in the collection of the Earls of Pembroke for more than 2 centuries before being bought by the National Gallery in 1929. It is one of the most famous and beautiful paintings of its time, but nothing is known of its origins, and the identity, and even the nationality, of the artist is unknown. Almost certainly, however, it was painted for King Richard of England, reigned 1377-99, for his personal use. Small hinged altarpieces like this could be closed like a book, carried on travels, and opened up when the owner wanted to pray. The unidentified artist who created this radiant masterpiece was most likely English or French, but other nationalities have been suggested. The Wilton Diptych, backed by John the Baptist, carrying the Lamb, and 2 canonized former kings of England, Richard II kneels in front of Mary, Jesus, and a host of angels. C. 1395, Tempera on panel, each wing 53 by 37 cm, National Gallery, London, UK.